Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for today, The Future of Learning, Engagement, Expedition, and Execution. And today we have Michael Niehoff with us. He is the CTE Grant Manager at the College of the Sequoias in California. And we're delighted to have him with us to go through actually a lot about technology and learning and how we can really prepare our students for the world in which they will live and find professional success. So I think that you all will get a lot out of his session today. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Questions will be held to the end, and you can pose them on the questions section in GoToWebinar. You can always chat with us, and you can also use Twitter. We have a hashtag, hashtag School Transformation, that will pull together any thoughts or ideas that you want to share on Twitter, but also if you have questions, you can certainly pose them on that as well. You can follow Odysseyware on Twitter at Odysseyware, or you can follow Michael himself. He is on Twitter at MW-Niehoff. So if you don't want to do that right now, you can certainly do that afterward. You will all also receive a recording to the full webinar. So if you're not able to stay the whole time, that's perfectly fine. Drop off as needed and look for that email to come soon by tomorrow, definitely. So without anything further, I think we will go ahead and get started. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. And would you like to go ahead and get started?
You betcha. Thanks for having me. Okay, we're going to jump in. And kind of the theme for today, if you will, is the future is personalized and project-based. And I think one of the things for me as an educator that's always a little bit challenging is we use a lot of, euphemisms, if you will, and we tend to have terms that become almost generic and overutilized. But in terms of personalized learning or project-based learning, I think these two are meant to coincide, and I certainly treat them a lot more than beyond just catchphrases. They really are kind of, pedagogical, and they really are, in terms of calling out what we believe kids are capable of doing, as all students, all ages, are capable of doing, and also a reflection of really what's happening in the world. Are these things just accidental, or are they really a response to both the change to the external world for our students, but also internally what's happening to them? And so these are the themes for the day, and hopefully they'll come alive in a variety of ways, and here we go. So first of all, who am I? You're welcome to read a little bit about me here or elsewhere, but I think more importantly, it again goes back to the kind of the philosophy. I've been a secondary educator for about 25 years, but I was very fortunate that I started off as a high school media teacher because I came from industry and came into teaching a little bit sideways, but the reality was I entered into a profession a little bit blindly like a lot of us, but was able to find success, I suppose, early on when I was able to do a number of things, and that was one, make things relevant, make things hands-on, access technology, even the limited technology we had 25 years ago, but probably more importantly, just really allowing the students to have a voice in their education and have them see an application for the things they were doing. And that didn't know a lot back then, but I certainly realized that's where the power lied. And then since then, I've just been able to hopefully kind of recreate that as many times as I can with students and in environments that I've worked in. So certainly invite people to connect with me in any way possible. I love a dialogue about these kinds of topics and anything related to seeing students enjoy their learning and having success and opportunity. So if you certainly are on Twitter, if you like to talk on the phone, you like to text, you like to email, you like to use Voxer, whatever, I'm open to that, and like a lot of people, just learn a lot by having those conversations and sharing and continuing to get inspired, because it is hard work. Okay, so what is behind the curtain of urgent change? So I think a lot of times I'm wondering if all educators realize that we are kind of in an unprecedented times. These are not, this is not the same old thing. And I hear that a lot from teachers, and we've been through this before. We go through these ebbs and flows, these cycles. And to some degree, it does feel that way, and to some degree, that's probably true. But I really think that we have to step back and say that we are really in a new era, and it's not about education just being a new era. The world is embarking on a whole new, universe, and obviously that's being impacted by technology, it's being impacted by the economy, I think it's being impacted by population. So I think when we start talking about changes in the classroom and changes in schools and changes in learning and education, we have to know that there's larger things at work here, and they may be different or larger or more powerful than what we experienced previously. So the first one, we talk a lot about standards, and I'm somebody who thinks personally that we're a little bit too standards obsessed. I think standards are supposed to be a reflection of what we're doing, not the driving force. And I think what you see is whether it's Common Core or some of the technology standards or some of the content standards we have, I think you see that these are making an attempt to be reflective of what's happening in the world. But as we try to standardize education, we sort of run into a problem that may be not in line with being personalized or project-based. It seems like the more we lean on the standards, the more we lean on rigid or limiting sort of forces. And so I think the standards are relevant, and I think that they're all well intended, but again, I think it's supposed to be a reflection of what we're already doing, not the other way around. So obviously we have technology, and our students are growing up with technology that certainly we didn't grow up with, and that you're not that part is relatively new. If you think about just in the last few years, with smartphones, and even some of the technology that's now in classroom, from drones to makers labs and so on, we really are, again, in unprecedented times. But I think what's really different about the technology that we have now is it's really recreating, it's really democratizing society. So it's not that many years ago that people were not able to do these things. Be a publisher, be an editor, be a content creator, be a videographer, be a digital photographer. But really now, all of us in the world, once we have access to certain tools and the internet, we can be all those things. Those things used to have to be blessed by people. So publishing used to have to be blessed by a publisher or an editor. Well, now anybody can blog, anybody can create their own website. So it's not just that we have a lot of technology available, and it's not just that students are growing up with it. Those are very important. But I think it's actually recreating society. And people can say that's good or bad, and I'm sure we could have long discussions and white papers on the pros and the cons. But I think we have to, accept the reality, and as an educator, I prefer to look at all the positive things that students can now do with technology that just a mere few years ago they couldn't do. And then, of course, obviously we need to engage students, and maybe that's different than it used to be. I think students have always responded to some things, things being hands-on, things being interesting, things being collaborative, connecting to their teacher, connecting to the outside world, experiencing something. We've always known that you learn more by doing, and yet we somehow have struggled to make that sort of the standard, if you will. It's something that happens in pockets or in a lab or 1 hour a week, but not in our daily pedagogy. But I think some things are driving this more than ever, that we realize that our students, our job is to engage them, is to ignite them as learners, versus just talk to them. So and yeah, it's about the real world. Our students are growing up in that world, and they're aware of it, and they're seeing every day the disconnect between school and their real world. So when we went to school, I'm going to give away my age here, but let's say I graduated from high school and college in the 80s, and we'll talk about that as far as career. But I don't know if the disconnect was the same. I think school always had a certain environmental restriction to some degree, but it was a lot more in line with the real world. But as the internet has come on, and all the technology we talked about, students are a lot more aware of things, and they're doing things outside of school that we weren't doing. So now, if they're not doing those things in school, the disconnect is larger. And so there's an awareness, but I also think it's a call to action for us that schools should not seem artificial. It should not seem disconnected. It should not seem manufactured. It should be seamless as much as possible with what's happening in the world. But given all those things, standards, technology, the real world, engagement, those are all important and relevant. But I really think that the call to action for new schools and new environments and new types of learning is really something larger. It's really unprecedented that I referred to earlier, that what's going on in the world. It's really about our economy. The global economy has arrived. And most of us are still trying to figure out what that means and what that looks like. I think you're seeing fallout around the world from the global economy, and you're also seeing success around the world. And I'm not an economist, but I do think that one of my jobs as an educator is to pay attention to that, because that's the world that my students are living in and going to be entering and working in. And it's having a huge impact. And again, we talked about the democratization that's going on in the world because of the internet. We talked about what it's done to commerce, what it's done to jobs, automation. There's an endless amount. And so, again, we have to kind of reflect and ask ourselves, hey, are we really in a new era that we have really not experienced before? And is that demanding a whole new approach, or at least expectation or definition of learning and school and education that we've never looked at before? So just real quick, I don't want to bombard us with statistics, but I think as somebody who's worked as a high school educator and now working at a community college and CTE, I'm really focused on this. What is going on in the economy? Where are people landing professionally, and how are they doing? And there's some pretty sobering, staggering statistics. I know as a college graduate in the 1980s, I did not have to worry about getting a job once I got my bachelor's degree. All of my friends, all of my peers, for the most part, all graduated with a bachelor's degree in a variety of disciplines, and all of them were able to get jobs. I don't remember anybody being unemployed. I don't remember anybody being stressed about finding a job. It was not even really on our radar. It was like, if you went to school and you graduated, you got a job. Well, that world has come and gone, my friends. And so when you see things like 53% of recent college grads are unemployed or underemployed, that's pretty staggering. So as educators, we really have, to some degree, programmed all of our students, go to college. If you go to college, it'll work out. And it's really more complex and more complicated than that. Certainly students need training and some sort of advanced education, but it has to be something more than just say go to college. First of all, half of them aren't graduating, and the ones that are graduating are unemployed or underemployed. I have a freshman in college who just started a few weeks ago. So when I see 45% of recent college grads return home to live with their parents, that's something that should get a lot of parents' attention, right? That's something that we maybe used to see once in a while, maybe in extreme situations, but now that's becoming commonplace, that people are, even the ones that are completing college and getting a degree, are returning home because of employment situations. And then if you really talk about what's going on in the economy for the future, that we know that a lot of the jobs that are going to exist haven't been created yet, the rapid changeover of jobs, and how's that looking to our students now in school? As we look at our students in our classrooms, is that a disconnect again? So just some things to think about. So I'm really challenging all educators to embrace the future of work. And I think I would certainly challenge all secondary educators, but I really have to challenge elementary educators as well, is that we can't be in the business of just the classroom or just the school or just education and not being paying attention to the larger forces at work. So we don't have to all be economists, but I think we all have to kind of be reading and studying what really the future looks like as best as possible for our students in terms of employment and career and professional opportunities. And the more we do that, I think the more we will see what calls to action we have to do in our classrooms and in our schools. So what do we need to know? I think we have to start studying a little bit. We have to start reading and being aware that these external forces are something that we have to contend with, and it has to affect and challenge us. So here are a few ideas. So one, I'm calling it the Uber effect, and I'm sure a lot of us have used Uber and appreciate that for its convenience and for the opportunity or cost effectiveness and a whole bunch of other things. But this is really, as we're seeing people, those people, I think it's like something like half of all Uber drivers, by the way, have bachelor's degrees. So they're part of that underemployed potentially, not unemployed, but underemployed. But I'm really talking about the Uber effect from the idea of how they are designed as a company or as a business model. And really what it is those are independent contractors. And so what a lot of the experts are saying is the future of the economy, future of work, is going to be more gig or contract oriented. So they even say by the year 2030 that 40 to 50% of all work will be contract work. That is a very different world than what certainly most of us have grown up in, and certainly our parents and grandparents grew up in, is that we typically went to work for one organization or company and stayed there, sometimes for our entire career. If you look at most educators, they typically, a lot will work in one school district or classroom, but our students are going into a different world. That global economy has really affected this. People are not going to be working for one company organization. They're going to be performing a set of skills or talents, and they're going to be shopping those around to people. I'm going to be doing a 10-hour project here, a 2-month project over here, a 3-week project over here, and I have to have the ability to manage that, to secure that, to go out and secure future work, regardless of what industry I'm in. So, and there's lots of different reasons for that, but it's something we really have to start looking at. So it's this idea, I'm not going to be an employee, I'm going to be a contractor. And you're already seeing this happen. I mean, I'm doing it right now. I'm doing independent contract work by doing this webinar, essentially on my lunch hour, right? And so our students are entering in a different world, and it's really going to be something that they have to be skilled to do. Not just the skills in their chosen profession, but the skills it takes to be an independent contractor, to secure work, to present yourself, to sell yourself, to market yourself, to coordinate and manage all that. It's a whole different kind of mindset. So what we're really asking people to do is to have that entrepreneurial mindset. And it doesn't mean that all of us are going to be entrepreneurs in the traditional sense, but we're probably going to have our students have that kind of entrepreneurial mindset where they are flexible and creative and able to market themselves and have an identity and be able to navigate that world. And so when we talk about things like mindsets, that's something we really want to think about is, do we all need to be aware of what it takes to be more entrepreneurial in the new economy? And what kind of education does that require? What kind of learning? What kind of skills is that? Asking those questions, I think, is imperative. So as we get to skills, this is just one idea, one interpretation of the skills needed in the new economy, if you will, in the future. Some of them look familiar, but a lot of them, I would say, would be new to most of us. So when we think like computational thinking, that sounds like that could fit into math, right? We've heard of some of these before. Emotional social intelligence, okay. Sense making could fit into logic and critical thinking and those things. But a lot of them are things that I'm not sure we really have a lot of expertise in, or certainly a lot of systems in place for. So for example, transdisciplinary. It's something that has existed before that we don't do across disciplines. But the reality is most of our programs aren't set up that way. But you're seeing it in things like CTE and linked learning. You're seeing that in thematic places, maybe in magnet schools and so on, where they try to connect content, try to connect subjects, and students don't experience those in isolation. When I see things like new media literacy, I think, Matt, how many of our schools, high schools, middle schools, elementary, community colleges, universities, are really teaching people about the professional use of social media or the impact of those skills on your career? I would say very few. So that's actually a skill. All people are going to need to be able to navigate social media in the professional sense. Design mindset. How many schools are teaching design mindset? Only a handful. Virtual collaboration. I mean, we're seeing students collaborate now through, we've always had peer collaboration, and we're seeing that being enhanced more now with some of the applications that are available in Google and that kind of thing. But really, how many of our students are collaborating with people in their community or outside their school or certainly across the world? That's really seen as a future skill that all professionals and career-oriented folks are going to have that skill, that ability. So again, if we don't model that and practice that in school, I think we're probably shortchanging our students. So just something to think about. So when we talk about skills, are the 4 C's just sort of a good idea, or are they really skill-based? And I'm going to argue those are really skills. When we talk about communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, are these just nice ideas, or are we really modeling these and teaching these every day? So if we have rubrics, are these represented? If we have standards, are these represented? If we have report cards and grades, are these represented? And that goes both for students and adults. Are we evaluating our success based on these things? And they sound a little bit like elusive ideas, or they sound like foundational things. But again, these are really skills that are being called out that our students need to know how to be creative. And I think when you say creativity, people think that's something that's just reserved for certain people who are born that way. But the reality is the economy is going to require all of us to be creative in some ways and to maximize our own individual and professional creativity. And I could say that for all four of the 4 C's. So here's something that's kind of fun just to compare what's changed. We see in 1970, if you look at what the valued skills were, they really were those traditional things that we called out in education, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic type thing. And then you got down into problem solving and interpersonal skills and teamwork and stuff way down the list. Well, it's almost flopped, right? So teamwork is now the #1 skill. So collaboration is being called out by the Fortune 500 companies as the #1 skill. That is a huge shift. And it's not saying that the writing and the computation skills and the literacy skills don't matter. They do. But it's going to be that collaborative skill that's going to kind of separate people. So people who are really good at working with a variety of people, and they're effective at it, and they embrace it, and they're flexible, and people enjoy working with them, and they're able to work in a variety of teams, and they're kind of fluid. They can go in and out of different groups and teams and organizations, out of different contract work. Those are going to be our successful people. So when we do things collaboratively at school, are we doing this just for fun, or because it feels good, or it looks good, or are we really calling out a skill? And I think we need to acknowledge that we're calling out a skill, and we need to make that more pronounced, and we need to really teach kids and let kids know that's what we're working on. We're working on our collaboration skills and everything that we do. And if you go back to personalized learning and project-based learning, there's just huge opportunities for collaboration. Really, true public projects and products are rarely done in isolation. They are collaborative in nature, and they are personalized in nature. So as we look at these things, I think it's just something, again, are we reflecting what's really happening in the world? And I think to some degree we are, but we really got to look a little further and say, hey, it's this important. If our students are unable to do this, it's unlikely that they're going to have a huge amount of success in the new economy. So I have a lot of discussions with students, and this is the #1 reason people get fired, is that inability to collaborate. So it's not lack of talent, it's not lack of technical skills, it's not even things like work ethic. It's really that nobody wants to work with them at some point. So we all probably know people within our organizations that maybe have this reputation, and that they're really going to struggle in the new economy because it's going to be the #1 skill, and you're seeing this already take place. In collaborative environments, people are being ousted who nobody wants to work with. So as we move forward, the future economy will be a learning economy. So what we're really talking about is, we've said this for a long time, we want our students to be lifelong learners, and that's always been well intended and always true, but I think now we're really talking about it's an obligation, it's a moral obligation and a skill set that they are going to be successful the more they know how to learn. So that's kind of the shift in why we're probably moving away standards-wise from content to more skill-based, because the idea is it's not so much what they learn, but that they know how to learn, and they know how to apply their learning. And if we can really get that mindset and that skill set going K-12, it's going to have a huge impact. Because we don't have a crystal ball about the future in terms of all the jobs, but we do know that they're going to have to be adaptive, and they're going to have large numbers of jobs in their lifetime. So that idea, if they really can become lifelong learners, we're really setting them up for success. So as we move forward here, this idea, this is why the technology thing is so powerful too. And when we say things like somebody's professional learning network or personal learning network, these are really calling out the future of the things that our kids need. So right now, this might seem something that only companies do, that we have a brand or identity, but now, given social media and the internet and kind of that economy that's going to be more contract-oriented, think about how everybody's individual professional reputation, online and elsewhere, is going to be so important. So again, in school, how do we start teaching and modeling these things? So if we're not using social media with our students at all, are we shortchanging them? If we're not teaching them about what a PLN is, if we're not teaching them how to brand themselves, that their name matters, that their online activity matters, that their pictures matter, that their content matters, that their language matters. And again, if we, in a project-based environment and a more personalized learning approach, we can have them do these things. This is something that can be incorporated into their work as they present and as they share their work. We can show them that if they share their work publicly, and we'll talk about that in a lot of ways to do that, they are establishing their professional learning network, and they're establishing their personal brand or personal brand identity. So this, again, is not just something that sounds fun. This is really going to be an imperative as students move into the future. And again, I would say in general, our schools are not doing this, but as you step into more project-based and personalized environments, you're going to see more and more educators realizing this is really important. And we'll talk about some ways to do that. But so fleshing out the resume, the skills come to life with this is what we want our students to be able to do. They have to be people that solve real-world problems and difficult challenges. And so as we look at our assignments or our lesson plans or our curriculum, are we really doing that? In a project-based environment, you are. Are you ideating and innovating? Are students starting up things, creating things? Are they designing things? Certainly, are they, like we mentioned, are they collaborating? And are they being digitally fluent and flexible, like we just discussed? So these are now the skills being called out a little bit, a little more descriptive in terms of what this looks like in the classroom. So how do we do it? Again, how do we become more personalized and more project-based, regardless of what our situation is, or our classroom or our school? Is how do we embrace these things in any environment they're in, or any subject or any grade level we're in? And that's kind of hopefully what we can try to do here. So first of all, we have to acknowledge that maybe our school environment or classroom culture there may be a disconnect, right? It may be something that has to be redesigned. So we have to look at traditional school is sort of at odds with some of the things that we're talking about. It's sort of at odds with the skill set called out by the new economy. So our top-down, lecture-based, sit in rows, as an example, or as examples, is really at odds with, innovation and creating those folks that are going to be those independent contractors. So we have to first maybe say, is it our classroom or our school, our program, our environment might have to be entirely redesigned. And that's okay. We need to call that out. I've asked this of teachers and administrators a lot the last couple of years. What if 10% of your student body decided not to come to your school next year? Because they can all go to online school tomorrow, and almost all of them have a nearby charter school they can choose. Almost all of them have an independent study school they could choose. They have lots of choices, and as each generation or each year of students realizes that, how are our schools going to respond to that? Realizing that all of our students could go to online school tomorrow. We could shut down all comprehensive high schools, all face-to-face schools could all go away tomorrow, and there'd be a place for our students to go. And I don't want that to happen. I'm saying, how can our schools address those needs? Why are those folks choosing online school? Why are they choosing independent study? A lot of it is out of that lack of engagement or boredom or lack of relevance, or not being personalized enough, right? Or not being project-based or project-oriented enough. So now that our students have real choices, that empowers them. And what it needs to do is empower us to create those environments everywhere so that regardless of their choice, we're preparing them for the future. We need to look at things like the Uneducation movement or the hack learning movement. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who's a principal, his daughter's in 6th grade this year, and they decided to ship her off overseas for a year to a relative across the world for her to live in another country. And she's going to blog about her experiences and do some writing and some publishing, and she's going to travel, and she's going to have all these, external experiences. And I think traditionally a lot of us would say, oh my gosh, she's missing a whole year of instruction in 6th grade. But I think we have to ask the question, what's going to set her up for the future more, that 6th grade year at the school she's been going to, or this Uneducation experience where she's going to become enlightened and inspired and experience things that will inform her for a lifetime. So we need to look at these things that are going on. There's a lot of people opting for these different experiences. The gap year, we have a lot of students that start college right after high school who are not prepared for that. They don't have a career in mind. They don't really have an understanding of what that's going to require. They'd be better off actually figuring that out, whether that's working or traveling. But we just need to look at these things and say, how do we bring these things to school? And again, if things become more personalized and more project-based, maybe we can have students can have that gap year in school, or a gap year experience, or a hack learning experience. And that's them being out of the classroom, out in the community, things like internships, externships, job shadowing, apprenticeships. All these things could have a hacked education or unschooling experience. Think about all of us individually have been inspired when we've been, some of our best learning that we know we've all done individually has been on, when we're on the job, or when we're traveling, or when we're at the zoo, or wherever. So how can we bring that to the classroom? I've said for a long time, it's great that we support special education students with an individual education plan, but are we at a point where really everybody needs that, regardless of their level or learning style or abilities? Is that so personalized learning plans or individual learning plans, that's going to force us to become more personalized, to ask every student, what do you want to accomplish this year? What do you want to learn this year? I think, having been with high school students for a long time, if they're raised or trained one way, that's a difficult question for them to ask once they're in high school, because they've gone through school where they haven't been asked that question, and they might have some really negative answers to that. What do you want to learn this year? Well, whatever we're supposed to do, whatever the book says, right? Whatever you tell me to do. But as we start retraining our students, because we want them to own that, we want it to be personalized and project-based, is having them buy into setting some goals for themselves, but more importantly, setting some learning agendas for themselves. What do they want to learn more about? What skills do they want to improve? That's going to set that mindset up to be that independent contractor in the new economy. So these are things that we already have in place that we really could embrace for everybody, and give everyone that individual attention and opportunity. We have great things going on, in career technical education. This is obviously mostly focused on high school and secondary education, where we have linked learning academies or work-based learning models or CTE classes and programs. But I think it's really starting to get students in the idea that not to pick your career today, but start specializing. Focus on something, because when you focus on something, you will learn at a higher level and experience something that will set you up for the future. So it's not so much about picking that career, but it is, let's start you doing something now. So why can't we have a major or a minor in high school? Why can't we have a focus area? And that could be a CTE academy or pathway, or it could be a linked learning model. It could just be a series of electives, or it could just be a customized set of classes based on their interest areas. When I was in high school, we had English electives. It was the greatest thing in the world. We had dozens of different English classes we could take. And these days, it's mostly, English 1 or English 9 or English 2 or English 10, that type of thing. But the more we get people to buy in and choose and create their own path, again, it kind of fits in with that, the new economy and what's happening in the world. And also models kind of what we want them to do in terms of ownership. Heck, the universities are doing it, right? So these are major universities now where you can create your own major. So these are no slouches, I would imagine, right? Berkeley and Cornell and University of Michigan and dozens of others. And so if they figured out a way to do this, if they figured out a way to buy into personalized learning, for lots of reasons, or things that are more project-oriented or more portfolio-based, then why can't we all do it? To me, we look to these kind of institutions and organizations as sort of the model. Then we should be realizing that they're making huge changes too to address what's going on in the world, and it can float all the way down to K-12. So real quickly, what does this look like in the classroom if we're doing projects? Just one way is to get students to take that ownership and to get more involved. So regardless of the project you're launching in the classroom, just think about different ways the teacher can facilitate that choice. So a lot of times we are asking students to focus in on a question or a topic or an issue or a problem, and that's great, and we're asking them all to do the same product. So they're all going to write an essay, they're all going to do a presentation, they're all going to produce a video, and that's a great place to start, right? But as we evolve, what can we do to change that up a little bit, to give students a little bit more input or a little bit more ownership or a little more choice? Again, all in the training, right? So we might give them the same topic or same focus or same question or same issue or same challenge, but we give them a choice on the product. Hey, you can do a presentation if you like. You can produce a documentary film if you like. You can do a written report if you like. You can do a photo essay. So we're going to give them different ways to respond to that challenge or question or issue or focus. Or we're going to say, hey, we're all doing a video documentary, or we're all doing an essay, we're all doing a presentation, but I'm going to let you choose different focus areas. Here's a broad topic. I'm going to let you focus in on an area that you're interested in. And then finally, we can do both, right? We can say, you choose the focus topic, you choose the question or the challenge, and you choose how you want to demonstrate the learning. So again, 4 easy ways just to look at how that can evolve, and teachers are going to facilitate that and change this up and keep it interesting for kids, and know that there's always options to do it. And there's reasons to do any of these 4 at any given time. But again, we have choice as a teacher to facilitate this, and then we have choices to give our students. Real quickly, just something that I've always played around with for years. I know elementary teachers can be really great at this, and high school teachers can be as well. Is it what kind of roles can we create for our students? I know one of the criticisms in the past is that kids are not responsible, but then there's that quote about that if you want students to be responsible, you got to give them responsibility. But I'm really looking for, again, this opportunity for students to specialize, and this is another way to personalize and create that kind of mindset and confidence that they're going to need when they are those independent contractors, right? So I just made up a few: student tech coordinator, project coordinator, media coordinator, presentation coordinator, social media coordinator, lab coordinator, graphics and art coordinator. So as we put students in teams or we launch projects, can we give them certain roles? And certainly maybe they can rotate roles, maybe they can create their own roles. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do this. I know as a classroom teacher, one of the things is it's hard to juggle all the things that are happening, right? And so sometimes turning some of that responsibility, as a classroom teacher, maybe I don't have time to get all my tech straight all the time, or all my media, or even to share everything on social media, but maybe I can have students take that for me, and then they're getting those skills and they're getting those experiences, right? Real quickly, I happen to, again, go back to being a media teacher. I believe in student voice and student roles and giving students large amounts of responsibility and with real application. And so I think we're looking at that democratization, again, really taking hold in schools. What roles can students serve in their school? So my last high school, we had students in on every interview for every teacher hired or any other school personnel that was hired. We always had a student or two on the interview panel, and they brought great perspective, great voice. It really elevated them in terms of their role and their voice and their experience and their resume. I was encouraging them to put it on their resume afterwards and in their portfolio. But this idea is that students have great ideas and students have really great insight, and we got to take advantage of that any way we can. So any kind of committee that exists, any governing body, any decision-making entity should have that student voice, and there's lots of ways to do that. And one of the ways is just to continue to ask students what they think. So as a classroom teacher or any other school administrator, asking students, what do they think of their learning? So if we want to personalize and we want to get them to own their learning, we got to ask them what they think. How are they doing? How are they doing on their goals that they set on their individual education plan, right? And there's lots of ways to do that now. Obviously, that we can do this anonymously. We can do this, where it's not anonymous, and we can ask them all kinds of questions. And again, we're not asking them to rate their teacher. We're asking them to discuss their learning experience. Are they learning? Are they excited? Are they engaged? What else would make them excited? What projects are they interested in? What goals do they have? So we can enlist this kind of feedback continually to help us become more personalized, right, and more engaged with our students. So. Teachers do great things in projects just by creating that choice again, project menus. One of the things most teachers have learned is we can't give students a blank slate because that can be overwhelming, but we give them choices by developing a menu. And as students create ideas, we add more things to the menu. But just giving that power of choice again gets students thinking and gives them a different sort of mindset when they buy in. So I've seen teachers do amazing project menus, and they continue to evolve them and add to them all the time. Digital portfolios. I think based on everything we've discussed here today, I think in my mind, it's obvious that we have to have our students have to walk out with that personal identity. So they have to leave school with that branding already started, with that independent contractor portfolio already in mind. And the reality is we have the ability to do this now, regardless of the technology in our school. There's literally, dozens of free web tools where every student can have their own website, where they get to keep their best work, and their resume and their best videos and their best photos and their best artwork and their best essays, and then we encourage them to share that with people and get feedback, right? And that's how they start taking that stuff more seriously. So I really think we're moving to a more portfolio-based system, and it's so easy now for every student to have this. Like students, we don't need to train them; they know how to do this. We just need to create the environments where we show them what could be on or in their portfolio, and how powerful that could be. We have like I mentioned earlier, everybody has the ability to publish now. So we all can be published, and we all should be published. So every student can be a blogger. Every student can be a video content creator, right? And it's not necessarily about that we're always producing, like let's say the video has to be, it's Hollywood caliber. That's not the purpose for a lot of our videos. A lot of our videos are quick videos that are meant to, be shared online and get feedback from and that type of thing. So, but as we get students to use social media and use all these tools, we really are, again, democratizing. Everybody can do this, and everybody has a need to do this because they're all going to have to showcase these skills later on in work. And the more of these skills and things they have, the more of these digital badges they can create while they publish. Again, more attractive they're going to be when they're out in that independent contract economy. So project-based learning, some great resources. If you have never visited BIE.org, they're kind of one of the leaders in project-based learning, and they do free resources for teachers. If you haven't been on this website, there's sample projects, videos of projects, rubrics, calendars, almost every project-based resource you can imagine, all free. Any educator can create an account and download all the materials. And they're on social media all the time sharing projects. So if you are interested in getting a great project-based learning resource, definitely check out BIE.org. The other thing is some of these things are things that we've done for a long time. A lot of schools have had a senior project, and that's still a really great idea. I would say let's start them earlier, right? Why just wait to the senior year? I used to do a thing called school improvement projects where I'd challenge my students that one of their culminating projects was they had to pick something in the school community they thought could be improved, and they had to do a project pitch and design. And at my last high school, we did a senior legacy experience, kind of a redo of the senior project, and you can see some of that there. But again, we're really asking students to take on something in their community, whether it's school community or beyond school community, and make it better. And that's not just a feel-good thing. That's really an employment thing, right? Because that's really what the future of work is, right? Seeing what problems are out there, what needs are out there, and being one of the people that offers up a solution. So that independent contractor mentality is going to be, I got to create work. I got to go and see what's not being done or what people are hoping gets done and be the person to kind of meet that need. And so I really think we connect our school projects to those kinds of things. And again, it's personalized, it's project-based, it's community-based, and it helps them create that portfolio, helps them create that personal brand, helps create the buy-in and the ownership. But they really see themselves now as real-world problem solvers. I'm someone that can impact my community, and that's a huge thing. So lots of ways to do that, but you know, online, tons of resources about these kinds of projects. Another one I want to mention, if you have not heard of or familiar with, is the 20-time movement, or sometimes called Genius Hour. And that reality is this is where teachers give students an allotted amount of time. This came out of the Google corporate mentality, where they used to give their employees 1/5 of their time, 20% of the time, to pursue a project of their choice. And so educators started adopting this, and the same thing. And it hasn't had to be 20%. It would be whatever a teacher wants to facilitate, right? But the idea is that we would allow students to pursue an area of interest. It does not have to be related to the course they're in or the any of the current work they're doing academically in any particular class, but it's something that they really want to pursue. So think about, again, as we create that independent contractor mentality, we've got to give them time to do it. We got to allow them to decide what it's supposed to be, and we're there just to support them. And could students do things that no one's ever thought of before, just by being given the freedom a little bit and remove some of the structures of it's not about a grade, it's not about an assessment, it's not about a score. This is about what do you want to do. And again, this is going to be a process because not all students are going to immediately know what to do with this, but as we train our younger students. So again, if you haven't seen the 20-time projects or Genius Hour, a great way to really allow students a lot of creativity. Well, there's a lot of great videos online and resources for educators to see what students can do at any given level when given some time and an opportunity and the freedom to pursue something. So I really, when we talk about project-based learning, you might hear different things like problem-based learning, challenge-based learning, design thinking. These all really are, in my opinion, different iterations of the same thing. It's really trying to allow students to address real-world problems, and there's a pedagogy to it, and there's a student voice and choice element to it. And you're really, in all these cases, you're really trying to extend learning beyond the classroom. So, if you haven't seen Matt Miller's Ditch That Textbook, one of the things that should come through this webinar is that none of this relates well to a textbook, right? Hard to be personalized with a textbook, hard to be project-based. So if the textbook is dominating our curriculum, then I'd say we have a disconnect. I'm going to say the textbook does not relate well to the future of learning. And we can talk about that in some future date. But anyway, again, problem-based learning, challenge-based learning, design thinking, all iterations of project-based learning. Some other resources, if you look any of those up, you'll find lots of great, especially in design thinking, some great classroom resources. Expeditionary Learning is another one if you've never seen eleducation.org. And again, it's just really this idea of empowering students. It's really this idea of getting them out of the classroom into the world and solving problems. And there's lots of resources, and a lot of people have created some really neat projects and really neat experiences for students that you can duplicate or replicate, but certainly borrow from and evolve from. One of the final things I just want to say is that what is our promise to our students for the future? So are we building in our school culture and in our school philosophy, are we promising them some things? Are they going to have a voice in their learning? Are they going to be able to make choices in the things they do? Are they going to have an opportunity to voice their interest in projects? Are they going to have an opportunity to voice their interest in how school decisions are made or school policies are derived? And here's some examples that we did at my last school, is that we tried to have a student bill of rights, and we really tried to make a commitment that we were going to listen to students, and that when it came to their learning, that they have a huge voice, and we want to respect that voice. And as we move into this new economy, I think we have to make commitments to kids about what school is going to be like for them, and we have to start calling out a little bit what those skills are that they need, and give them an opportunity to look at it through this lens. So I've referenced the new economy a lot. If you haven't read or seen or heard Kevin Fleming, you really need to go to his website and see why all this stuff is happening. So he really looks at the labor market and how this global economy really is evolving, and how there's a disconnect to our schools, and that the skills that students are going to need are for a large part, a new set of skills, and we're not in many ways addressing those in our current classrooms for the large part. So again, if you haven't visited Kevin Fleming at thattelosis.com, please do, because that's where a lot of this is inspired from, for sure. One of my favorite old quotes: if it's not illegal or immoral, why not give it a try? So if we're not breaking laws or school policy, what are we afraid of? And I know we're sometimes beholding to a variety of things, but I think in many, many cases, if we were just not afraid to try some of these things, we'd be surprised at the success our students would have, the community response we would get. And once students get empowered in these ways, it's really hard to dial that back, and it's really hard for others to say, well, that's not valuable or valid. So again, I definitely encourage you to reach out to me in any way that you'd like. Would love to have conversations with people about these ideas. It's hard in this amount of time to really get into all the details, but hopefully a few resources for you. And I really think, when we talk about pedagogy or mindset or philosophy, it really does start there, right? We have to believe in students, and we have to know we want something different, and go beyond maybe some of the things we've done before. And we got to trust that they can do it, and we got to believe that they can do it, and we got to not be afraid. There's a whole world of resources, and right now there's no excuse for a teacher now, an educator, to say I don't have the resources. They are literally free and endless. It's mostly about not being afraid to try it, right? And creating the environment that allows that to happen for your students. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That was much more deep than I expected. And I remember you and I talking yesterday about this, and you said that you were giving a lot of resources, and I've been following and checking out websites. So there was a lot of things that I'd never heard of. So thank you so much for that. And I'm hoping that I can pull a lot of it together and at least tweet it out to people, because there's just a lot of great resources that I don't think are well known. I have, if you don't mind, a few questions that I'd like to ask you about. Yeah, so you talked a lot about the global economy is changing the world that students are going to be entering, and really, in a sense, everyone's going to be running their own business. And you've made the point that this is really going to be changing the learning. But what specific implications does this have for learning and for school and for just being prepared for your career?
Well, what first comes to mind is if we're not giving students choice, if they're not creating projects and they don't have ownership in that, and they're not using a lot of the tools that we discussed, they're not publishing, they're not learning the new literacy, the new media literacy, they're not creating that digital portfolio, they're not creating that brand or that personal identity. If they're not doing any of these things, it really seems like to me that we're doing a disservice. And so if it's a traditional classroom that's not doing any of that, I just don't know how that student is going to be able to compete, because
Mm-hmm.
somebody somewhere is going to be able to do these things, and so in a more competitive environment than ever, I think we have an obligation there, and I don't know what's more important than training kids to be economically, solvent. I love all the other things that we try to do in education. Certainly, we want them to be citizens, and we want them to be, literate. All these things go hand in hand. None of these things can be separated out. But we have to even go further, I think, maybe than we've ever thought of before in terms of the skills that they need, to truly be economically. And we're seeing this certainly now, aren't we already seeing this in some of our, the millennials that are graduating from college right now, they can't find jobs. We're sort of seeing the fallout of this a little bit, right? We have a lot of kids getting out of high school and even kids getting degrees in college who don't have these skills. And without putting the blame on anybody, I think we can do better. I think we have to say that, we're already seeing the results of this, and it's only going to get worse if we don't. I don't want to be gloom and doom, but so the implications are everything. I think if our classrooms are not trying these things, not embracing these things, I think we are shortchanging and cheating kids. I have to be that blunt about it.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
No, it absolutely does.
And I don't think it's one thing. I think there's a lot of ways to do this, right? And I tried to give you some highlights. I think it goes back to, but hey, what's our goal and what skills do people need? There's lots of ways to get there. But I can tell you this, that, doing traditionally what most of us know as school can't be it. So the textbook, taking notes, just taking tests, quiet classrooms, no projects, no real world connection, not using technology. The disconnect is going to be larger, and it's just unacceptable. So.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, and I think that you've not only shared resources, but even just now shared a lot of real specific things that can happen in the classroom that can help teachers create successful students. So along the same lines, you'd shared in the past what had been important skills that employers would seek out, and you compared that to what is sought today. So nowadays it's teamwork that's one of the most important things. Do you have an example of something that you've done in the classroom with students that has the purpose of that activity or that project was learning teamwork?
Yeah, dozens come to mind, but I think I have it in both in my media classroom and in my community-based leadership classrooms that I had, and all where we were doing anything that was kind of a real world challenge where they had to solve a school problem or solve a community problem or address a community need or school need. I don't want to always use the word problem, but those were always those were required to be team efforts. So they at least had to, typically all of those things had to at least have a partner. So I didn't allow students to work in isolation on any of those key sort of benchmark projects. It doesn't mean that students never worked individually on things, or they didn't have different roles within a project, right? So they might have an individual responsibility or role, but the larger project or the larger application was always a minimum a partner and usually a team. So on any of the larger projects, I never allowed them to do those individually. On small projects, yes, and certainly individual roles within a project, but when they had the I would say those significant kind of benchmark sort of culminating projects, so they always had to be collaborative in my experience, because they were going to be more powerful. They were, that was going to force a better idea.
Right. Oh, that's actually a really good way to put it. You create conflict in order to force a better idea. That's good.
Right.
Okay.
And I think
well,
that, the subconscious kids will realize that they have different talents and skills. Some of that they do have some knowledge of, but they experience it when they work with other people. When they realize that their skills and talents come out, but so do other people's, right? And so they,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like realize, oh my gosh, we each have some things to offer here. You really are good at this, and I'm really good at this, and sometimes it's called out, sometimes it's not, but it definitely comes alive. So
that's really good perspective on that.
And that's pretty real world. That is what happens in the real world, right? So
absolutely, we can all vouch for that. So I really want to thank you for putting this together, and I know that you spent a lot of time and were very thoughtful in pulling together what you wanted to share and with the resources and really highlighting a lot of the work that you do. A couple of us were tweeting some of the really impactful things that you said. So I think that, in addition to that, a lot of your word choice was really powerful. So that's, it's been great to spend this time with you, and I thank you. And everyone who's on is going to get this recorded and, obviously share it with other people. I think that there's so much that can be put to use immediately. And I also would like to hand it over in a minute to Tiffany, who's with Odysseyware, and she had the chance to be a part of this today as well. And I'd like for you, Tiffany, to talk a little bit about Odysseyware and anything that you might want to tie back to some of the things that Michael shared with us. So, Tiffany, if I could do that, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, and thanks, Michael. I appreciate your thought leadership in these areas and just some really practical applications of how to engage our learners. One of the things you said at the beginning was about our future being personalized learning and project-based learning. And what I want to share is that Odysseyware supports that same vision. What we offer are 21st century online learning solutions that can be personalized for any student grades K through 12. So when you're thinking about a classroom and you're thinking about, how do I personalize for my English language learner or my gifted and talented learner or perhaps students who are working at different levels, that's where we come in and can provide content that can really be personalized to meet the needs of every single student. You talked a little bit about, obviously, college and career, and, I cringe thinking about my own kids that once they graduate college, are they going to have jobs and are they going to be able to be employed? And I think about the things that we offer with Odysseyware, not only content to prepare students for college, such as core academic courses and electives and things of that nature, but also a really big emphasis on CTE. One of the things that we do is actually offer 83 different CTE courses that align to the 16 career cluster pathways. So we talk about preparing kids for beyond the cap and gown and giving them that choice, that you talked about, where they can make their selections of what they're interested in and then, of course, kind of dive into that learning. A couple of other things, Liz, that really resonated with me. You talked a lot about project-based learning. And, I like to share that our solution integrates all kinds of project-based learning, including capstone projects. So not only can students work on culminating projects throughout our solutions, but they can also collaborate with one another, and teachers can even use customization functions to integrate some of their own content as well. Michael, you mentioned some of the great free resources that are out there, and there are a lot of things that teachers want to have access to and dive into, but they need a place to put it all together. And one of the great things about Odysseyware is that we have customization features that actually allow teachers to do just that, to pull the best things together and then make them available for their students. I was very interested in what you had to say about internships, and I wanted to share that Miami-Dade School District, who works with Odysseyware, was actually able to use our customization functions to pull together units on internships and work-based learning, and how they could actually pull in local integrations of content into the solutions as well. So just kind of some exciting things that I think that we're also sharing. And then last but not least, Liz, I do want to make sure that everyone is aware that Odysseyware is not just a content provider, but also we provide academic services, and even our Odysseyware Academy. Michael was talking about kids being able to take online courses and perhaps even go to virtual schools or charter schools and things like that. And we know that students need choices, but we know that districts need choices too. They are facing teacher shortages, and they're facing needing to be able to offer courses that they don't have teachers that are certified to teach them. So through our academic services, we can certainly multiply that teacher capacity by providing you with virtual certified teachers. And then we also have Odysseyware Academy, which is our virtual certified online solution that can provide services as well. So just kind of to bring it to a close, I would just say that thank you, Michael, for sharing all of these visions about personalized learning. I think that's what we're going to have to do to be able to teach to the edges. And that's kind of our philosophy, you know, whatever we need to do to reach and teach every single student that we have coming through our schools. So Liz, thank you very much.
I concur.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for bringing it all together and talking a little bit about how it can happen. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. Very much appreciate your time, and we will go ahead and sign off now. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.